spiritually, we in a war, and they are prisoners of war, and there's people that are missing in action. So it just keeps me on my toes.
Wow. You have enough on you to have people ask you questions and enter into a conversation with people. You know that. It works. Well, Frank and I have been talking along with my wife and Ron Bell and a number of people about the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and the possibility of your ministry or the ministry coming to Boston or Massachusetts. And when you walked in, sometimes a guest will come in. I've never spoken to the guests. I've never seen them. And we have to start from scratch. But when you were walking in, I said, this is my brother. We've been on the phone. We've been on Zoom. So this is cool. This is going to be cool. Indeed. So talk to people about the Fellowship of Christian Athletes before we talk about what you're trying to do in Massachusetts.
Sure. The Fellowship of Christian Athletes was birthed in the mid-'50s. There was a basketball coach by the name of Don McClendon, and he was a believer, and he was frustrated because he was seeing some of the athletes at that time that were popular. They were being used to promote different things like cigarettes and alcohol. And, used to have them in the magazine and on TV, and everybody was just smoking freely and drinking, and it was just like a social norm. And he said, what if we use these athletes to promote the kingdom of God and what the Lord does, because they're such influential individuals? So he went down and had a conversation with a man by the name of Branch Rickey.
Okay.
Branch Rickey's an important guy because he's the one who broke the color barrier in the major leagues through Jackie Robinson, and later helped Roberto Clemente break into the league. So he was a big advocate for black and brown people. And so when McClendon asked for 5 minutes, it turned into a 5-hour meeting. Wow. And the birth of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes took place, where we started communicating with the different athletes and using them to have camps. The first camp was in Colorado, in Estes Park, and hundreds of people came out. Later turned out to be thousands, and this group of athletes that wanted to represent the kingdom came together and started doing things like praying at midfield or half court after the game. And so we started realizing that we can use the impact of these athletes to change the world.
When I was just sharing with you, as you were sharing with me, about some of your experiences that you've had to pray with or speak with athletes, I'm not athletically inclined. I'm not a basketball player. I'm not a football player. So I can go into an athletic environment with the professional sports, and I don't know who the different people are.
Right.
And when I was doing that year-old stint with the Patriots, other than Tom Brady, I didn't know who anybody was. And in some instances, it worked for me because I wasn't playing up to anybody. But I wasn't going to tell them that I didn't know who they were. Right. I was just being me with them, and I felt like I was with my youth group. That's what I felt like. They were that young, and I was able to reach them the same way I reach the young people in my church. I'm assuming, am I making the assumption that you are a sports enthusiast?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Like growing up, man, I was out in the streets of New York playing every day. That was really an escape for me because, I lived in an abusive household, alcoholics, child abuse, physically and amongst other things. So to go out into the back of the building, go out into the field, to the parks and play ball, it was amazing to just escape. And then, in sport, you start thinking about, we have an idol. This is a star. And we start like elevating those people. And so one of the things we do when we train people is to say, hey, don't be a fan. You come in, and I've had the privilege of being around these athletes that are like millionaires and successful. Yeah. They've been getting much love and respect all their life because of their athletic ability. But, for me, I just look at them one leg at a time, they just young people trying to figure it out. And if we can help them, because these are millionaires that now have an opportunity, like that's generational wealth. Yeah. If we can get those guys thinking properly and thinking, heavenly, then they can make an eternal difference.
I was asked to perform a wedding for one of the Patriots, and I drove out to the house, and I said, "Oh my gosh," and it was in the backyard, and I was acting like I knew everybody, and then I remember there were some other. Oh, they started coming. A couple of them started coming to church, and I made sure I did not acknowledge them at all from the pulpit, so that they can come in and relax. When I became sick, they gave me a football, and it was signed by a number of the people who were in the chapel, and that was in 1995, so it was a long time ago. Recently, both of my sons have been saying, Dad, let us take the football. Let us take the football. So what you going to do with it? You can get a lot of money for it. I said, I don't really care about that. Come on, Dad, come on. So my youngest son has the football now. He hasn't come back to tell me that he did anything with it, but I think he's a businessman. I think he's going to do something with it. Wonderful opportunities opportunity that you have to minister to athletes, and my experience really changed my life. It really changed my life. So let's talk about what is your organization thinking about doing in this climate here in Massachusetts?
Well, me coming in contact with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes was really, I wanted to reach young people. And I had an organization that created an environment like a after-school program on steroids.
Okay.
And so I was like, how can I reach the students? So started going into the schools and like where the Christian kids, where we can kind of bring them together. And I came in contact with this ministry, and I was like, wow. Sports and God, I missed it in a sense that I was a very good athlete, and so my mother used to say, man, you got to get into the books, and the brothers on the streets got me, you know what I'm saying? I started hustling and doing all these things, and my mom was like, what you going to do? And I said, listen, I'm going to be in sports no matter what. I said, if I can't play because I didn't get an education, maybe I'll be a commentator. She's like, you need an education for that, dummy. I was like, well, I said, I'll sell hot dogs at the stadium. Right. Never thinking that God would have me, be a minister, a licensed and ordained minister to go into these realms. Mm-hmm. And so, we started going into the schools and connecting. And what I found out down in the South is when we would have these gatherings, what we call huddles, is when you get people to come together, small group, get in the word, use different materials.
Was that in school or outside of the school?
It was in school, in the public schools.
So you had to get permission to do all
Get permission.
Okay.
It's illegal for the schools to try to take God out. Okay. They can't. If a student says, I want to have a Bible study, he can have a Bible study on campus.
And bring people in? So he can bring his students. He can gather up the students and get together before school, at lunchtime, as long as it's not interfering with this practice and all those things. So, and then they start a campus club. And so once they start a campus club, they need just one person on staff in the school to say, I'll be the liaison. Mm-hmm. So that's either, what we look for a coach, but it could be the custodian worker, that comes in. So when I started going into these environments, I just started realizing, this was in Orlando, Florida, that even in predominantly Black and Latino schools, it was just the white kids coming together. And I was like, what's going on with this? Yeah, that's strange. Yeah.
Very strange. And I came back to the people and I was like, what's happening here? And he says, well, our people don't know how to reach your people. And it's because they didn't have a Black person or a Latino person in staff, and they've been in ministry for 25 years. Mm-hmm. So they was like, we just don't know how to reach them. The guys look at me in my eye. I'm not racist. Like, I want to reach. I just don't know how. Yeah. So, there's a language that we speak in our communities. There's a culture that's been developed, and you could come in and be nice and kind, but you want to see people that look like you, talk like you, and
especially today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially today, it's gotten a whole lot worse. We have a situation with the homeless in Boston, mm-hmm. and they've taken over a part of the city, and they're being moved from that part of the city, and they're coming to a new black neighborhood here in Boston, and the guys have been defecated right in front of the restaurants, and there have been the needles all over the place. And so the city was trying to figure out what to do, and they had a black staff person who went to the Nation of Islam, not the churches, but went to the Nation of Islam and hired the brothers from the Nation of Islam, and they go down there 20, 30, 40 strong, and they just move these people out of that area. And the people are not going to tango at all with the Nation of Islam.
Right.
It's like, why couldn't they have come to the church? Because we're not ready for something like that. So go ahead.
Yeah. No, that goes back to that missing in action, right? I mean, there's prisoners of war. These homeless people have fell victim, and we see that in the story of the Good Samaritan, right? He comes in, finds a person broken, beat up. In fact, it says he was half dead. That's where you're at when you're not born again. But he said he's ministered to him the oil and the wine and cared for him, took him to an inn, said if he has any other needs, I'll take care of it. And so, going into these communities, African American, Latino community, inner cities, we're talking about 80% of these people are just single parent homes, moms working 2 jobs, on welfare, trying to do this, brothers on the corner hustling. So, we could speak to that. And the blessing for me is that I was able to speak to the mercies of God that got me out of those scenarios. And so, there's a relatability, there's a connection. We talk about relationships. It's because you relate to somebody. So, FCA quickly realized as a ministry when I came on 17 years ago, we were 85%, Brother Bruce, 85% white male Southern Baptists. So, we produce after our own kind. So they just kept getting more white people that were open to Southern Baptist, understanding. So when they put the brother in there, they put me in there, they started saying, man, all these kids coming out the woodwork, because most of the teams had African American Latinos that was getting it done, but they weren't coming to these gatherings because they didn't have somebody to relate to.
Okay, so let's go back. So you're going in, you want to see this happening. You're saying there's a lot of white teenagers that are coming in, and not a whole lot of African Americans or Latinos. So what did you do? How did you say, okay, this is going to happen? What exactly did you do to encourage the
Awesome. That's a great question. I was just
being you,
vulnerable. Yep, being me, being honest about the plights, the hurts, the rejection that I've dealt with as a mid-50, black person, dealing with those things. So there was a connection there with, maybe you're not understood. What's going on at home. We at school, and we know what we got to do first period, third period, fifth period. But what we going through outside of the school is completely different. And so, I just started talking their language, instead of bringing some type of kumbaya music, we was talking about, bringing some hip hop, some R&B, the music that we feel. And of course, wasn't bringing it from the world's perspective, but bringing, Christian alternatives.
It wasn't nasty.
Yeah, it wasn't we, that's the other thing, the alternative. You go into these locker rooms and they got this music that's just violent, is braggadocious, is disrespectful for women. So we come in there and say, look, we could rock a nice beat, you know what I'm saying? We could drop the beat, we could bring these things, but what are the words saying? What is it speaking into your life about representing the Lord, being a good teammate, representing your community, honoring your coaches, taking advantage of this opportunity that you got with your, physical abilities? So we come in, we relate, we know where people were at. We could deal with the angry young men, the angry young women, and then just say, hey, I feel your pain. The struggle is real, but God,
So now you're bringing the black and Latino brothers and sisters in. So what's happening to the white crowd? Is that still growing? Was it 50-50? What did it end up looking like?
Well, I'm gonna say a joke here, and not to be disrespectful in any way, but I remember hearing the arguments like, what's with this Black History Month, which we're in now? Like, so much emphasis on Black History, and what about White History Month and all these things? It's like, well, y'all got the other 11 months. Like, let's look at these overcomers and the plights that this community has gone through. So, the white kids, they still got their place, and we still connect with them, and that's going well, and bringing understanding to them, like why do all the black kids sit at the same table? Why do we feel like,
because we feel safe when we sit at the table together.
Exactly. So it's really bringing attention to them about how we feel and educating them, because as long as we keep whispering, we either whisper on the side or we yell at each other, and we need to get into conversations, and that's what FCA does. We create an environment where 2 or 3 people can meet together on a consistent basis and just sit under God's word, and God's word to talk about equality, God's word to talk about acceptance and tolerance and respect, and honor to people of different cultures. And so, we get into those conversations, and then it meshes. We become the melting pot that we're supposed to be. But you have to have Black and Latino representation for the Black and Latinos to feel comfortable to come into that environment, because if we're not going to be understood and respected, and we don't have people in leadership to govern those conversations, then we might as well have the conversation on the side.
So how many Frank Reynosos are there, and how many are actually involved in this ministry like you are? Because I've heard from you, because you're coming to Massachusetts, but how many of you?
Yeah, there's 3,000 Fellowship of Christian Athletes staff members that are on staff throughout the country, and now
all raising their own support.
And so that's another challenge why some of the Black and Latinos haven't been able to break in, because of perhaps their upbringing, the education. I'm a 7th grade dropout, right? So I ran away from home when I was 13. I never went to college. So when I got born again in my mid-20s, the people that I was rolling with, I didn't have any college graduates in my life, business owners.
Sure.
So when I go out to raise support, people are like, what you talking about? Even in the Black communities and Latino churches, because we're struggling to keep the doors open of our church, and sometimes we can't sow into the mission work. But the white community, if they have, and it's not just the white people, but if they have more opportunities and funding, then they could support their friends and so forth. So we're a little short in Black and brown people being on staff, but the tide is turning in FCA.
When I was at another radio station, it was a white Salem communication radio station, Christian. I was broadcasting 5 days a week, and I did it from 11 p.m. until 12 midnight, and catching people at a very vulnerable time in their lives. And I received a call from a senior citizen. She sounded like she was Caucasian, and she said, I'm losing my eyesight, but I'm appreciating your broadcast, and I want to make a donation to, and I didn't ask for money. She said, I want to make a donation to your ministry. And I said, thank you very much. And that a check came in the mail. And it was, again, she's losing her sight. She wants to write checks while she can before it's gone. That check was $1,000. Then she sent another one for $1,000. Then she said, I received so much support being on the white Christian radio station.
Yeah.
Now that I'm on my own station that we own as a Black church, the Black community doesn't give that way. They're giving in their churches, but they're not going outside of that.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different struggle. So as it relates to you raising your support, or other Black and Latino brothers and sisters, or just brothers?
Brothers and sisters, absolutely.
Sisters raising their support. What is that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging. It's challenging, but when you call and and you understand the mission, and it's made clear to you, we have little things that we've been saying all our lives. Where God guides, He provides, and where there's a mission and a vision, there's provision. So, you have to go out and, when I think about all the communities, and I go into the white communities and ask them, because they want to do something in the inner city. So we just have to be able to pitch high quality vision, understanding the nuts and bolts of it, letting them taste and see what's taking place. So, I tell, my white friends, like, man, come down into the hood, see what's going on, see the plight, see these young people that are champions, they're warriors, they just need support. And so, when they see it, they're willing to give, and in the black community, you just got to go in and tell them, man, we have to continue to excel and have a mindset of prosperity so that we can sow into these works and do these things, even for the churches. We partner with churches. So this church is across the street, not this church in particular, but churches are across the street from the schools. And I'm like, how are you building a bridge from the schoolhouse to the Father's house? And, it takes time, it takes money, it takes resources, but we could build that bridge. And FCA is one of those things that allow that bridge to be built and get young people back into the church.
So you're here in Boston, not just, why don't you tell people about the athletic event that's happening and that you're going to, and then tell people what the overall vision is for coming to Boston.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll reverse engineer that. So, got born again in Florida and started doing inner city work, as I kind of shared. And that thing was just, the results was spectacular. Mm-hmm. So we would get like 200-300 kids to go to camp. We started reaching that black community. People started giving scholarships. We started getting 1,600 people to come to camp. These young men were getting born again, transformed. The coaches were dumbfounded at what was happening. The coaches started getting born again. And there was a revival in Central Florida. A book came out of it called 3-Dimensional Coaching, which is about really ministering to the whole man, not just the physicality of sports or the psychology of sports, but trying to reach the heart behind the jersey. So it blew up in Orlando. They asked me to go to Miami in the inner cities. It blew up there. In that process, I started training nationally our staff to get staff in the cities. So it was a lot of my white brothers, Caucasian brothers, and trying to show them, you need to raise money and hire you some black and Latino people to go into the hood and do these things. In that process, one of the leaders of our ministry said, you've been talking about New York and how you got caught up in drugs and lost out on the dream of playing sports. We don't have an FCA in New York City. So I started going to New York City 1 week out of the month. Then it was 2 weeks out of the month. Then I quit Central Florida and just started working exclusively in New York City and still traveling. Well, I'm happy to say I only had 2 numbers in New York City when I went up there. And 8 years later, we have over 100 Bible studies. We have 5 staff, right? People that are raising their money. So when that mission was accomplished, I work in what they call the Northeast region. And it was like, so we're trying to hit these major markets. And we do have FCA in Massachusetts. We have Janine Cavallaro, and Dan Barnes. They're doing great, but they're in the suburbs. And they're white Americans, wonderful people. And it was like, man, we can't crack the nut in Boston. We just don't have enough relationships. And so I told them I'll start coming up. And so in that process, just getting in sporting events, I've been able to get into some of the schools. And I won't mention them because sometimes that's like, the haters start hearing things. Sure. But for the church, I mean, they're, prominent schools. I'm having a conversation with a guy who's in the Hall of Fame of Harvard, black man. And he knows the coach of Harvard, who's a black man. And they want us to come in and start doing some things with their players. So in these different sporting events, and lo and behold, there's a promoter out here that does MMA, mixed martial arts, combat sports, which, me personally is not something that I really like to engage in. I was raised by a fighter, and I did box for many years. But MMA is a different deal. You got elbows and knees, and it just comes across super violent. And this promoter said, "Man, I'm concerned about the safety of the fighters, and we have commissioners, and we have, when you have an event like that, you have to have 2 ambulances, EMT on board in case something happens." And he said, "I would love to have somebody pray." And so sometimes the church is like, "Oh, that's evil," and but I think of like Jesus. He was with, sinners. He was with the drunkards and the prostitutes. So, I go into that environment, and they put 40 fighters in front of me and all their trainers, and the commissioner talk, the doctors will talk. Then they give me 5 minutes to talk, and I tell the guys, "Hey, today's a big day in your life, and God is watching. Anything you want to say to him, anything you want me to say to him, anything you want to be prayed for." And these guys come over, get emotional, talk about their grandma and their parents, and we build up relationships with them. And a lot of those guys wind up getting born again later, and then can go and be coaches to the younger talent that's coming up and things along those lines. So, that's what we're doing, in Boston. But, my connection with you and with a few others in some organizations that I've been a part of, that we talk about interdependency, is like, who are the churches? Like, we're looking for black men and women to come on staff with us, to if they feel like, man, I've always had this pull for sports and I love God. And, as you see, even some of the athletes at the Super Bowl this week testifying about their faith in Christ Jesus. And so, no bigger platform than that. One of the biggest events, the World Cup, the Olympics. We love when we see people make political statements, racial justice statements, and then statements of like the honor of being in a relationship with a living God. So we're looking for people to come and find out more, to volunteer, that know coaches. We have material that we could put in their arms and in their hands, rather, that they could share with their players and teams, and people that would even write grants to see God begin to move in the community of Boston. So that's why I'm here. I don't know anybody, and or many people rather, but the people that I do know, like yourself, are just excited about us making a difference in people's lives via sport.
So what are some of the strategies of how you crack that walnut here in Massachusetts? It's tough. It still is tough in Massachusetts, but all things are possible. With Christ. So what are some of the strategies that you're using and implementing? Because I know that one of those has been praying. You've been praying with a group of people here in Boston. What else?
Yeah, I think you just need people to share with you the lay of the land. Healthy people. What's going on? Who's living where? Where are the shorts? Who are the movers and shakers? When I went to New York City, one of the things, and I've traveled the world. I've been in every continent. I've preached on every continent. I've preached in every state in America. And, a lot of times we go into places and tell people what they need. I like to go into places and say, what do you need? You tell me. I know we bring Jesus, we bring manpower, we bring prayer, we bring resources, but, I want to scratch where you itching. So we need people to just really begin to have conversations with us to see what the needs are. And what we found out, Brother Bruce, is that if you want to reach these kids, these teams, we found out, Billy Graham said something years ago. He said, a coach has the ability to influence more people in 1 year than many people do in a whole lifetime. We started doing research behind that, and we found out that one of the most influential phrases in society is coach says. If coach says you got to be on this bus at this time, forget that CPT time, that Latino time. We going to get out of here at 7 o'clock. That's the power and the influence of a coach. If the coach says, hey, man, you need to do better physically, You got to shed some pounds. You got to put on some muscle. You can't be doing these things. You got to, get your sleep in. You got to have a curfew. Man, coach says it, they do it. Coach says you got to get your grades up. Kids that don't like school, but coach says it, and these kids get in there, they get tutored, and they wind up getting a scholarship or wind up learning some things in life to be a person of discipline, and wind up changing their generational situation. So in knowing people and knowing the community, we always trying to find out where those coaches that want to go deeper. Brother Bruce, being a coach is like being a pastor. Any place of leadership, heavy is that head, many of the challenges. So yeah, coach is there to throw the ball this way, here's these techniques, but then you're driving kids home. Kids having problems, issues with each other.
Sounds like being a youth pastor.
Come on. When I went in, because I ran away, I never played organized sports like that. So when I came with FCA and they said, we're going to build up relationships with coaches and administrators in school, I was like, I don't know nothing about that. Right. But by that time, I was already a youth minister. And when I got around these coaches, I said, they just like me. They love young people. We use the Bible, they use sport. Why not use both of them? And so coming alongside of them, one of the things that pastors love so much is a volunteer. And coaches love volunteers. So we got men and women in church twiddling their thumbs. We got sisters in schools that need a healthy sister to come and give the word. Not a guy saying, you girls need to. No, you need a sister to say, hey, ladies, I've been through this. My we talk about this, and I'm here to mentor you. I'm here to build you up and bring you in. So if the school can't stop us from coming in and bringing Christ, where the church at? Where the people of God at? Well, some of them just don't know. And people like me and yourself are just being that clarion call. Like, call me. Let's look at the giftings that you have, and let's position you, because when you in the will of God, man, you feel the joy of the Lord, the joy of salvation. Like, you feel the purpose. And our purpose is to minister to the next generation. Somebody once said that when your work with the next generation is done, your work on the earth is done. We learned some things through the mistakes we made, and we need to pass that on to the next generation. And the next generation they want to hear from us. They want to hear. They don't want to like, oh, you guys do this and y'all music and y'all this. They want to hear from us the pits and valleys, but how we got to the mountaintop.
Let's talk about the next generation. So when I became a Christian at age 18, and 4 weeks after I became a Christian, my pastor sent me to a Bible school in Lenox, Massachusetts, predominantly white. Most of the students there came from the South or New Hampshire, so they had never really gone to a school with black people before. There were about 4 or 5 of us on the campus, and it was a tough journey. And the freshman orientation, I was a freshman. The orientation was called Slave Day. Oh. And so what they wanted all the freshmen to do, including me, was to dress up in a diaper, get a bottle, and they were going to put us on an auction block, and they were going to auction us off to the upperclassmen and women, and you become the slaves for them for that week.
Yikes.
Well, again, I had just come from Boston. I had just come from the streets. I was 4 weeks old in Christ, but I was 18 years in the streets, kind of experience. I refused, absolutely refused to do it. And my pastor who sent me to this Bible school was a member of the Board of Trustees. And working with him, we got Slave Day banned forever on that college campus. That didn't make me a popular person. But again, learning how to navigate your way through all of this, because I stayed at the school, and at the end of the year, I was leading youth rallies around the country on behalf of these white Southern or white folk from New Hampshire, because God had changed my life and built something in me, and God had also changed their lives through the tension that we all had to go through to learn how to be in Christ together. Now, Massachusetts is a It's a difficult place to. A number of youth ministries have come to Boston, and some have not really established anything. One or two have, but there's, to the best of my knowledge, there's no ongoing youth ministry in our city right now. So, as much as you can share, you've been around some of us, and we've been around you. What doors seem to be opening for you? What strategy are you going to implement here in our town?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one of the desires that I have is to be able to tell the story of what we're trying to do, and go into the Black churches and the Latino churches and say, how are we reaching our teenagers? And when we ask that question, do we just start knocking on doors in our community? Well, that's a tactic. But we know where they all are. They in the public school. They all gathered in that place. So it's really finding pastors that have a youth group and their kids are going into public school and they want their kids to impact the school. They want them to influence them in a positive way. But we're sending them into the midst of Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't know when was the last time you went to a public school. I was at a basketball game last night, Brother Bruce, and I'll tell you, Coach was there. I just met him, and we had a great conversation, and he's like, okay, come on in and do this. I want you to work with my teenagers.
Black coach or white coach?
Black coach. So, and part of that is that, you just got to go. When you go into the inner cities, they want help. Sometimes you go into these rich communities, they don't need no help. We good. We got a program for that and whatever. And they don't have things that meet the needs of people's hearts. They just keep developing talent, just keep, making people smarter. But that doesn't mean that they're working on their character or letting them understand what holiness is all about. So I go to this basketball game and I'm sitting in the midst of all the students, the language, the disrespect, the craziness.
Were the parents also at the game?
Minimal parents,
okay.
Brother Bruce. It's crazy.
Okay.
Like we're there's 30 kids on the court competing. You would like to see 60 parents. I didn't see that. I seen the kids being rambunctious, parents there not saying a thing, and I'm thinking, when I get a hold of that coach.
I was going to ask you, what would you do to break into that environment?
Yeah, I think it's really letting coach come to understand the influence he has. And then when we start having conversations about these men, about, how they act, at the end of the game, the home team won, which was the ones that I was supporting. They started a little bit of lack of sportsmanship.
They didn't shake hands?
They didn't even shake hands. They got into a fight, and one of the guys from the opposing team fouled out. He started crying, and the players was like, yeah, look, he's crying. And they just, lack of compassion. What I hope is next year, after I'm working with this team for a while, when they see their opponent crying, they go and put their arm around his shoulder and say, hey, man, great game. You left it out. I see you wanted this. We're going to go and represent, and we're going to take you with us. If we win, you say you lost to the champ or whatever. But you love on them, you care, you build up relationships. So, it's really in the strategy, if the church don't want to go, and, we see where the church don't want to go. The people of God don't want to go. God had to send David because the church was standing back, afraid of Goliath while he's talking and downing the people, defiling them. And he said, David said, I'll do it. Isaiah said, send me, clean my lips, give me words to say. So, at times, unfortunately, you got to bypass the church. But some of us are going to say, I can't make the difference that God wants me to make just staying within these four walls. So what does that look like? And good pastors know that. Good churches know that. Use FCA as an opportunity to go in. I call it the briefcase meeting. We set up meetings with the athletic directors, the principals, and say, here's the equal access law that was passed in 1984. On every campus, you can have, a glee club, a chess club. They have gay clubs. Why not have Christian clubs? So then who gets to open up the Christian clubs? Well, if it's a church, then it's like the Baptists or the Pentecostals or the Lutherans, the Catholics. But with FCA, we are non-denominational, interdenominational, and we just say, look, let's just keep the main thing. We have to make decisions. We have to be servants. Our core values are, integrity. We have to be people of integrity. We have to be people that are willing to serve others. We have to be people that operate with teamwork, and if we putting those things into practice, those are young people that you want to be around. And so when you talk to a principal and tell them this is what we want, and then when it comes to religion, that we're tolerant. Hey man, if you're Baptist or Pentecost, we still brothers, and we need to learn how to operate in that brotherhood, because if we unite, we could then make a difference on the campus.
Have you met with the Emmanuel Gospel Center leaders yet, Jeff Bass?
I have heard that name quite a few times, but have not had the privilege yet.
They actually used to have their office in the South End. They sold their building, very wise decision, and they're now just 3 blocks away at the big white church, right in Carbon Square. They're a parachurch ministry, and there are a lot of parachurch groups that come to them to find their way into the city. And Jeff Bass is the executive director. He's been there for a while. The 2 executive directors that were there before, one of them was the one that encouraged my mother to let me go to a Christian college. And my pastor was the one that opened the door. So, they may be somebody to talk with. Also, there's a young sister by the name of Ruth. I believe her name was Wong.
Yep, I heard that name too.
So she's critical because she was working with churches to build partnerships with the schools. We had a partnership with a school in Roxbury. My wife, Karen, was a social worker at that school. And another gentleman that used to come to our church, who's in Florida now, he also got a job at that school. So we developed a partnership because Karen and the young man were there, and we stayed with that church. We had a suburban partner. They provided a lot of the financial resources to help us do it. We did it for about 3 or 4 years. It was really phenomenal. Awesome. And Ruth is connecting to all the churches to try to get as many churches to develop partnerships. Some of them last for 4 years. Some of them last for 5 years. Then for some reason they fade away, and I think that's okay, because you can't sustain something when your staff has changed or whatever. But she is somebody you need to talk to, because if anybody wants a way into the school system, she's the one that's built up the credibility as it relates to the Christian community. And if I'm correct, she's still based. So she was based, but she still could be based out of the Gospel Center. I'm not 100% sure I can check on that.
Yeah, I'm tracking everybody down. Like with COVID and coming out of COVID, and when we was dealing with those different variants and stuff, it made it a little bit harder.
Oh yeah.
And then it gave sometimes the administrations in the school the excuses to keep people out and stuff. But now that we're breaking past all that, some of it's in our rearview mirror. It's just really connecting with folk, and so I'm excited to meet these individuals. And what I want to say, Bruce, too, is when we come in, and what I learned in New York City, and what I learned all my life really, is when you come into a place, and we talked about a little bit earlier, like, this is what y'all need. It's like, what y'all got going, and where can I put my hand to it? Like, where can I serve you and keep building you up? So it's the partnerships that make a difference, because we can't just all, try to do things on our own and have these different silos. We have to intertwine. And so, that's our heart. If someone like a Ruth or different ministries are doing things, like, how can we come up, and this is what we specialize in, sports and, hitting the inner city. And so we'll add the support to build up what you're already doing.
Well, we have somebody who wants to talk with you. I don't think they want to talk with me. You're the one that they want to talk to. Caller, go ahead. You're live on the air.
Hi, Frank.
Hello.
It's Karen.
It's Karen.
Hey, Karen. My sister.
Listen, I have thoroughly enjoyed your perspective this morning, and you've really explained FCA in a way, it was more depth and in a way that I really previously had not understood it. I have a question. Okay, period. I have a question. God can do absolutely whatever he wants to do.
Yes.
So I'm not putting limitations on God. But given the need for the kind of urban suburban connection and a mutual understanding of each other and the current racial climate in this country, I know that has to come up with urban kids. So do you all address that, or do you just kind of focus on what you focus on?
No, absolutely. I mean, for us, like I said, one of our, mottos is reaching the heart behind the jersey. So if you're dealing with, those racial tensions and feeling like you're not being heard, I think one of the things that we have to do is to teach our community how to communicate, their anger, how not to suppress things and just be honest, open, and transparent about what they're going through. So, yeah, we love sport. That's the door, that's the avenue into which we, are able to connect with people. But it's life. It's whatever you're going through is the things that we want to talk about. We want to help you and these student athletes, they're amazing. I mean, we have young people out there that are just so outstanding. They just need somebody to come alongside of them. So if they want to be activists and they want to speak their mind and, look at the, Colin Kaepernick, by him taking a knee. It just brought so much conversation. And who was it? It was an athlete, and many of them is just the NBA with the Black Lives Matter and the conversations that they have. There's a political side to everything. There's an imperfection to everything. But, as black and brown people, that's part of our experience. It's sometimes it's the hole we still feel that we're digging out of, in the NFL right now. They have a rule that you have to interview a black coach or black coaches before you hire anybody. So there's still things in, these racial tensions and environments that need to be addressed, and athletes are some of the best people to do it.
Okay. And you're saying there's willingness in general, curiosity, humility, and even where there isn't, there is a willingness to pursue it.
Absolutely. Okay. And we have to, and that's one of the reasons that I'm here, because like I said, in Massachusetts, we actually have, and those two people I mentioned earlier are directors, so we have a few other staff, but the hierarchy of FCA, they're like, let's send Frank, let's send some, because if we touch Massachusetts and don't touch Boston, or we touch Massachusetts and don't touch enough black and brown people, we have failed. And so that's what we're putting up in the forefront. We want to, right now, in my heart, I'm looking for a black or Latino director for Boston to help build this. And when we find them, I'm telling you that the ministry is going to support them, because Boston's important to God. So it's important to FCA. So that's what we're looking for. Yeah, we want volunteers, we want coaches, but we're looking for somebody who can embrace the vision and run with that.
Right. Well, I'm excited about you being here and your persistence since our first conversation, which I think was pre-COVID, I think.
Yeah.
Because when I would go around and, and talk to folks, just what little I knew about FCA, I would get is that a white conservative evangelical organization?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm good. No,
Yep.
That's okay, Karen. I'm good. So, that's real.
Yep.
And it either has to be acknowledged, or like there has to be a yeah, but to it, or in addition, to it.
Absolutely. And I can't wait for you and some others to meet, our divisional leader. And he's a black man, Rick Isaiah, and he's in the NFL, was a great leader who's gotten to banking and pastored, and man, he's just been a great advocate. And we started up a diversity program with FCA, and it's turning. And our leadership is amazing, because not only are we really looking at women and Black and Latinos in our ministry, we also looking at things like we have all abilities. So we working with kids that have physical and mental challenges. And now we've brought it off internationally. So now, 20 years ago, I was in a room with a bunch of white leaders, and now we see the Asians and women. And so now we starting to look more like, God's heaven.
Right.
Instead of, 1,400 white people's heaven, it's a lot different. I've been challenging people. I'm saying, so I'm in like 2 or 3 Bible studies a day. And so when I get with these people, I say, hey, tell me about a black character in the Bible. Ooh, you should see white people, black people, young, old. There's a few. And really how we express that, it's like maybe 7 or 8, the Shulamite woman, Moses married a black woman, and how we are taught. But you could make an argument, just start from page 1, God created man, and and from Adam. So it's really just like really looking at that, and I just want the community and all the listeners to know that we are not a white ministry. We're not a Southern ministry. We represent the Lord, and He represents each and every one of us, all bloods from all races, all kinds.
Gotcha. All right, Frank. Good to talk to you. Thanks for having a little conversation with me.
Blessings.
And I know you're hooking up with a couple of people later today, so I will talk to you later.
What about it was good to talk to me?
Yeah, you too.
Okay. Good. Goodbye.
Bye.
Well, so Karen's monitoring. I let her know that you were going to be on today. She didn't know. I didn't tell her weeks ahead of time. I just sent her a text. So I'm glad she was listening. And again, the thing that's unique about this is that it's being recorded.
Yes.
We'll be sending it up to YouTube, and I'll be replaying it.
Amen.
So it will be replayed on numerous times so that people will hear you. And this is another way that you enter into our city with people hearing you on the airwaves and saying, I've heard him before. We have about 2 minutes left. Okay. I can't believe, man. We're just like scratching the surface here and getting to know each other.
Yes.
So, parting words. Speak to Boston. Just talk to the people in Boston about what you'd like to see happen here.
Well, Boston, you have a beautiful city. You have done a great job. I know there's a lot of history, a lot of bad history and challenges, but we've come a long way as a people, and we're still learning. And there are many influences and many ways that we can, slice the pie, if you may, and consider sport. We see politics, we see music, entertainment, technology, and sports has its place. And it's been an idol for many. And, I'm a New Yorker, so I've been in plenty of arguments, Knicks, Celtics, Rangers, Bruins, Giants, Patriots. And but really, sport has a deeper purpose, and that's to reach people and bring the community together. And so if you're out there and you want to know more, my information, my email, my cell phone, I'm coming back. I'm flying up, at least once a month to spend time. So I want to meet with you. I want to meet your coaches. I want to meet your students. I want to meet your pastors. And we want to serve you in a way that we think would be beneficial for the city and for the people in the city.
Frank Reynoso, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, here in the studio in Boston, going to an event. Is it Saturday?
It's tonight, actually.
Oh, it's tonight. So he's going
in the Shriners Auditorium.
Oh, Lord. People are going to be knocking each other out. And they're going to need his presence there in more ways than one. Thank you for coming on. And, again, we can do this without you being here. We can actually have you call in or Zoom in. And we can put you all over our networks so that people will become familiar with your voice and then with your personality. Man. So thanks for being with us today. Coming up in just a few moments will be Leon Rock coming in from Washington, D.C., and I'm hoping that many of you will continue to listen to our broadcast this morning or this afternoon, because he's going to be talking about politics, and he is a Christian believer. Stay there. Do not go anywhere. We shall be right back in just a few moments.